improve the comfort and energy efficiency and livability of our homes, create thousands of jobs, and I have the perfect person to have that conversation with tonight. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Melinda Zeterik. And she's the general manager and founding member of the Fourth Pig Worker Co-op. She has a master's in environmental studies from York University with a focus on community renewable energy and sustainability, and is a graduate of the Renewable Energy Education Program of Solar Energy International, located in Colorado. Melinda's career has merged her passions for green construction, community organizing, and education. She's worked as a builder on straw bale houses, designed and installed solar, electric, and hot water systems, and has been a general contractor for eco renovation since 2007. At one time, she served as a general manager for the Ontario Sustainable Energy Association, where she developed renewable energy co-ops throughout Ontario, organizing diverse stakeholders throughout the province to support cooperative-owned power. And I believe you're the founding president of the Lake of Bays Renewable Energy Co-op as well, which is a not-for-profit organization building renewable energy facilities in Lake of Bays, Ontario, to benefit local community and the greater environment. And I will have to say that the last time I met with Melinda in Lake of Bays, we also toured the brewery there as well, which was really nice. And Melinda's a frequent presenter on energy efficiency and renewable energy, and a former board member of Passive Buildings Canada and the Solar and Sustainable Energy Association of Canada. And she is incredibly busy, and so I'm deeply honored that you've joined us tonight, Melinda. And I think just to start the conversation, I just wanted to ask you, like, how are you doing during COVID?
Yeah, it's well, thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here and to get a chance to chat with you, even though we're not in person this time. And it's because it's new times, and it's really it's definitely challenging, but we're yeah, definitely looking for creative opportunities and seeing how we can make positive changes that maybe we didn't have the opportunity to do before. But yeah, we're busy. We are a construction company, so we were essential workers early on, and so lots of navigating and new practices and protocols and habits and new ways of doing things to keep everybody safe and keep people working and have safe jobs for everybody. It's been a lot of work, but we're still working at it.
And yeah, how has it been? How has it affected the business? I mean, obviously, construction, as you said, you could keep operating, but I'm just thinking of like PPE, public health protocols, physical distancing. Like, what's that like for a construction company?
Yeah, it's definitely made good project management be the key to any project, and everything from making sure when we're scheduling trades that we can't have people just show up because they happen to have time to work on something. It's got to be scheduled. Only so many people on the job at the same time. Procuring PPE at the beginning was a challenge. Wearing it for extended periods of time can be a challenge depending on what people are doing. And then also economically, clients, we have a range of types of clients, but some have been really negatively affected by the economic situation. And so their ability to do the projects that they may have wished to do also has shifted. So we're seeing more people want to renovate, but it's difficult to renovate somebody's home while they're living in it. And you have very strict COVID protocols as well. So that's also something that we're navigating.
Yeah, I bet that must be challenging. And I'm curious, have you seen demand go up or down for renovations because of COVID and the complications associated with it? Not to mention how it's affected people economically.
Yeah, I think we're seeing there's some interesting shifts happening. So our company operates both in the GTA and in Muskoka, and we're seeing I think probably in the last couple of months, a real increase in projects for renovations. And after the first couple of months of people getting used to new ways of doing things, people renovating their homes so that they can have a suite for their parents, or because their kids have moved home. Like, people's lifestyles have changed, which has meant a need to change the way they live in their house and adapt their housing situation as well. So we're seeing that for sure. And then lots of people spending more time. Maybe people have recreational homes in Muskoka that are spending more time here and needing to improve those, or people are also moving around, and lots of properties. The real estate market has, it went down at first, and now it's very busy right now. So lots of people buying homes and needing to change them.
Yeah, and I've had some contractors tell me that they've run into some supply shortages. Have you experienced any supply chain disruptions or shortages of building materials?
Well, lumber hit an all-time high price several times in the last couple of weeks and continues to. So that is a huge challenge. We're seeing major price fluctuations. So giving people clear, predictable estimates of what the product is going to cost is very difficult to do right now. And supply chains are difficult. It could be anything, and it's not necessarily predictable until you go to buy it what it's going to be all the time. Certain dimensions of lumber might not be available one week, or certain appliances have really long lead times right now. So HVAC equipment, it's across the board, and it's not consistent, and so it's a lot of having to keep up with our suppliers and keep on tabs on things. And a lot of the things that we use as green builders are often have longer lead times, because maybe they're not the most common materials that you might see on the shelf. A lot of them are, but we're a little bit more used to having to plan that ahead, but it's certainly still a challenge.
Right. So I want to just shift gears a little bit and just go into a bit, given your experience, like what are the benefits of a green renovation, and maybe even define a little bit, what is a green renovation?
Yeah. And I think sometimes that word gets used to mean a lot of different things. So when we say green renovation, we are talking about, and for me, it's work on a home that improves it in a way that improves the energy efficiency of the home, improves the indoor air quality and the health of a home, and it makes it a more comfortable, safer, better place for the people to live without having any negative impacts on the environment, either locally on the site or also through the supply chain of materials. So we're talking about making sure the things that we use to renovate that home, whether it's the finishes, the paints, or the insulation, or the materials that we're going to bring into that house, making sure that those weren't made or constructed in a way that's going to have result in a lot of carbon emissions, a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, just to get the stuff, insulation or paint or whatever it is, to the job site, and are also going to be healthy once they're for the occupants of the house once they're brought in. And it's ideally one that's going to last and only need to be done once. A green renovation isn't something where the materials need to go, have a 5-year lifespan on the siding, and it's going to end up in the dumpster and need to be redone again a few years later. Stuff that can be maintained and kept up. So it's really the whole system life cycle approach to looking at something. It's not one attribute or one type of material. It's looking at the whole renovation as a whole life cycle of the home, and as a whole house as a system. So we're improving everything and looking at how all those improvements work together, so that they complement each other and the house works properly for everybody.
Right. Yeah. I think sometimes people don't realize two things that you mentioned there that struck me was, one, just how much off gassing there is of building materials and paint and things like that, and just how that affects indoor air quality, and how it's an important consideration. And then the other thing that you mentioned that I don't think a lot of people, because I think most people think of energy efficiency, but just the way you've talked about, like, indoor air quality and other types of improvements, the types of
Mhm.
materials you select, etc. Just
Mhm.
looking at the whole life cycle of the materials from start to finish, basically.
Mhm. Yeah, in some ways, improving the energy efficiency of a home, I wouldn't say it's simple, but it's a very measurable, or can be a very measurable, and there's a ton of different ways to achieve that result. But if you don't also consider how you're achieving the energy efficiency, then you put potentially the occupants at risk, or the environment at risk, or the climate at risk.
Yeah, and so you mentioned climate. How important do you
Mhm.
think green retrofits are to addressing the climate crisis?
Green retrofits are essential. They're a not only do we absolutely need to improve our homes so that they're resilient to climate change, because right now a lot of homes are substandard and aren't going to be able to survive the storms and the weather and the experiences and the flooding that we're going to continue to have increased events for. Um, but it's also this incredible, and we need to reduce our energy consumption. We're fortunate in Ontario, we have a great um, low carbon grid. It still needs a lot of work, but we've done a lot of work on it, and we've made incredible progress, and we're going to continue to make progress on that, I hope. So we can use electricity without causing a lot of climate impacts, but we want to make sure we're using the least of it as possible, so that we can we can sustain our livelihoods and keep everybody safe. But it's an incredible opportunity, because construction or green retrofits, there's millions of homes that need improvements, and those are jobs, that is investment, that is activity in our economies at the community level that will help sustain our local communities. So it's necessary, and it's also it's necessary for the environment, but also necessary for our communities and our economy, I think.
Yeah, I think you raise a good point, because one of the things I like to say is that these are jobs that you can't ship to China or
Mhm.
some other low-wage jurisdiction. And the other thing I like about green renovations is that it's companies of all sizes. I mean, you can have
Mhm.
very small companies to very large companies doing, major projects, and can all be employing green building techniques and hiring green builders to do that work,
Mhm.
and literally in every community in the province.
Mhm. Yeah, and we have this great opportunity also to build our local low carbon construction material manufacturing base. There's such a huge opportunity for us to have low carbon windows, low carbon insulation. There's an infinite number of things that need to go into sustainable homes that we could be building right here. So there's manufacturing, individual trades, small companies, big companies, commercial retrofits, home retrofits, schools. Schools we all know need new ventilation systems like yesterday. So there's no end to the work to be done, and the missed opportunity of not doing it, and the lost health and well-being that we lose without that being done.
Yeah, and I would say, in addition to our homes, it's our businesses as well.
Mhm.
I was just touring a farm-based brewery a couple weeks ago
Mhm.
in the Orangeville area, Good Lot Brewery, and we
Excellent.
were physically distant out among their hop plants, and
Mhm.
enjoying a nice craft brew that was literally the hops had been grown there, brewed there. It was I was
Mhm.
calling it the 20-meter beer. But anyway, they
Mhm.
had said that their brew house that Forrest Pig had done the all the renovating of their brew house,
Mhm.
which I thought was
Yeah.
fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's they have such a great vision there, and they're so committed to brewing sustainably and fantastic beer. And so we did a renovation there. We added insulation that was had a low carbon impact, low upfront emissions, and made this turned an existing old building and farm building into a modern energy efficient brewery that with solar panels and storing carbon in its walls. It was fantastic.
Yeah, no, it's pretty amazing.
Hmm.
So I want to get a little political now. I'm a
Hmm.
politician, so I have to do that. So I
Okay.
introduced a motion in the ledge
Hmm.
on Wednesday, calling on the government to deliver a green building program.
Hmm.
And I'm just wondering if what your thoughts are of what role government can play in helping incentivize green renovations,
Hmm.
and maybe just even helping people afford to do the work or to contract
Hmm.
out the work.
Yeah, I think government involvement is essential, and we've had some good programs in the past, like um, the National Energy. I forget the name of it, but because it was shut down, the energy audit, eco energy audit program, and so something like that, where we bring it back, where we also have measuring of carbon, now that we have more sophisticated tools now than we did when that program was around, to really measure the carbon and the climate impacts of a retrofit. And some of the key things about that, I think, that were great were that it involved trained, licensed eco energy auditors who were able to really give people the good advice that they needed and evaluate how best to address a home's energy efficiency and the opportunities for renovation. And so governments can incentivize those programs and create those sorts of standards. They can create also mandatory energy ratings for pre-sales of homes, for example. So, we are generally pretty savvy people when we're buying things. I don't want to call us consumers because we're citizens, but when we as citizens go out to buy things in our economy, generally we like to do a lot of research and know what we're doing. But when you buy a home, there's very little ways for people to get a clear understanding of how comfortable they're going to be in that home, how much energy they're going to need to keep that home working in a way that's safe and meets their needs. But having that information, like a label, that exists, we could make those labels mandatory when people buy homes, would be fantastic. And it was, I think, supposed to be made mandatory. If you want to get political, many times, and right before proroguing and things like that happened. So bringing that back, and we have building codes. Our government creates the building codes and creates the standards by which we build. There's absolutely nothing stopping the government from creating a building code that says you have to meet certain negative climate impacts, like that you have to store this much carbon in your building when you renovate it, or you meet these standards. Our Ontario Building Code is on track to be net zero, so we need to make sure we don't lose sight of that, while we also bring in the lens of the upfront emissions and the carbon emissions of the construction as well.
Right. And along those lines, I mean, one of the things that some people say to me is, well, this green thing sounds great, but how am I ever going to afford it? It's going to cost me more. How do you address those kinds of concerns that it's a nice to have, but maybe outside of my budget?
Yeah, I think this really gets to the question of what we measure and what we value, and is why we need a strong role for government in this sector, because there isn't necessarily, green building isn't necessarily more expensive than regular or non-green building, when the finishes and other things can make a bigger difference on a cost, except when you're looking at trying to make the most, when you're really looking at more affordable building. When you're at custom building, whether it's green or not green, that makes very little impact to the cost on a high-end building. But on a really affordable building, the difference isn't necessarily because it's green per se, but because, as I was in my definition of green building earlier, saying green building means that it's safe and comfortable and resilient and long-lasting, and more durable materials, more conscious design, takes more time and more effort. So there are more expenses to making buildings safer and for occupants. And it's really, I think, a question for us as society. Do we value people's ability to be housed in a safe environment enough to make those building standards affordable for people or for agencies and organizations, and make sure that we're funding housing to the standard that it needs to be at, and that we're not allowing substandard housing to get built. And there's a lot of political mechanisms and financial mechanisms that pay for themselves in healthcare, reduced healthcare costs, and improved productivity of people in the workforce. There's so many ways that it's by spending our economic activity on making homes better, our economy will be so much stronger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sometimes I also think just even the energy savings alone gives you a nice return on investment, let alone all the other important elements that you've brought in, especially I think air quality and just healthy living. Yeah.
And the challenge is that our financial institutions, our banks, our credit unions, are places where people go for financing for renovations. They don't know how to measure that, or how their systems aren't set up to value that. So I think that's where government needs to come in and make it a standard, or incentivize it and fill that gap, so that people aren't stuck having to pick options or live in houses that cost them way more in the long term, and give them, irritate their allergies because the humidity is too low and they can't get it up, and there's condensation and they've got mold and all these things that happen in a non-well designed, non-energy efficient home. The current economic system for housing doesn't lend itself to housing that's actually affordable for people.
Right. Yeah, and government certainly has a role to play there for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I want to shift gears once again, because I'm on the province's Economic Recovery Committee. And so there's been a lot of people looking at the building industry, construction, and just the trades in general, and saying, okay, here's an opportunity where we can recover from COVID, maybe address some of the employment challenges that many people are facing. But do we have enough trained people in the trades? And so one, I wanted to just ask you about, the availability of the skilled workers in the trades in general, and then specifically follow up with, are there ways that we can create opportunities for women, Black, Indigenous, people of color, who oftentimes face systemic barriers, and I think especially in the trades, some strategies of overcoming those barriers?
Absolutely. And the construction industry right now is missing out on the creativity, the innovativeness, the contributions of the potential of such a huge segment of our society, because there are barriers up for the people that you mentioned. And so from a construction sector perspective, our buildings need those people's contributions. We need a diverse contribution. We are not, we're missing such an opportunity. And I think looking at those barriers, and because of the shifts, maybe there's an opportunity to actually start doing things differently. I think childcare is an essential element for giving people access to jobs like construction who have childcare responsibilities, and having safer job spaces, places that are safer for women and Black and Indigenous and people of color, because harassment on construction sites, unfortunately, typically is much higher than your standard workplace, and that creates barriers for people to enter the jobs as well. So that can be done through regulations and standards, and also through cultural shifts that we need to make, that the sector needs to make. Free training programs, subsidized paid training programs for women and young people to have focused training to get them entry into the trades. The training itself can be challenging if you're the only woman or the only person of color in a training program. There's additional barriers there as well. So there has been some organizations call for quotas in training programs. Others are suggesting specific oriented training programs, targeted training programs. But we need more people in the trades in general. the construction sector needs more diversity, and I think we need to rethink a little bit how we do construction, and whether or not we need to make some significant shifts to make it a more productive and safer workplace for everybody.
And do you think, so Fourth Pick, for those who don't know, is a worker co-op.
Mhm.
So maybe you should explain a little bit what a co-op is, and what makes you distinct from another corporate entity. And does that, well, why don't you start there, then I'll ask you another question.
Sure. So yeah, we are incorporated as a worker co-op, which means that we are governed in Ontario by the Ontario Cooperatives Act instead of the Corporations Act, and we're owned by the workers. So we don't have outside shareholders or an outside owner or one single owner who's a sole proprietor who runs the company. We have currently 6 worker owners who sit on the board of directors and run the business. And then we have, and they might be carpenters or junior carpenters, or myself as the general manager or office admin staff. But when they're on the board, they're the owners of the company and running the company. So when they're in their, and everybody who works for us has the opportunity to become a worker owner after 2 years and their probation period. So that people have real engagement and ownership over their workplace and can really help determine the terms of their workplace and contribute to making it a good job for themselves and for their coworkers. The Cooperatives Act that governs all cooperatives in Ontario is all of us who are cooperative entities, and there's tons of us across Canada. There's billions of dollars in investment in co-ops in Canada, and in Ontario, there's a strong co-op movement. We are all governed by 7 international principles of cooperation. So instead of the person who has the most invested in the company getting the most say, like if I have 51% of the shares in a corporation, I get to tell everybody else what to do. People can make different levels of investment, which gives them different levels of return, but they still only have one vote, one member, one vote, regardless of how much you've invested. So those are some of the key things that make co-ops different. And studies have shown that co-ops are far more resilient and more likely to be around in the long term. They out-survive traditional businesses in research. So we like it because we feel like it's a resilient building business model. And so far we've survived the 2008 crash and COVID. So we're living proof of that so far.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you if that helps you attract, when you say maybe we need different business models to attract different people into the trades, do you feel like the co-op model provides a way of attracting maybe more diverse members of the co-op or than what maybe you'd have in a more traditional building construction company?
Yeah, I think there's definitely not only co-ops, but also conscious building and green building in general, I think tends to attract a more diverse workforce, partly because as co-ops and as green builders, we are trying to do things differently. And we recognize that the ways things have been done don't work for everybody and don't work for us in our society as a whole generally. And we're trying to do things differently and hopefully more open to feedback and receiving and making sure that we're also doing continuous improvement on our ways of making our workplace welcoming. And it's certainly something that we don't think is ever done in our efforts. We do have a high number of women in our company in all roles, and certainly higher than the construction average. I think we're about half right now, and that's fairly unusual. So it's something we make conscious efforts to achieve as well, and I think that's a big part of it as well.
Yeah, well, congratulations on that one. I actually think of how many times I hear the Ford government say, "Oh, we have to attract more women in the trades." I'm thinking maybe they should call Fourth Pig for some advice. But on that note, we probably should wrap up. And Melinda, I want to give you an opportunity, just if you have any parting thoughts about, the importance of green buildings. I know you've done a lot of work in renewable energy over the years as well, of just what steps we need to take to, I guess, create jobs, but at the same time address the climate crisis.
Yeah, well, if I can do a shout out to some people to check out buildersforclimateaction.org. There's some great resources there on how to create a actual, net zero carbon buildings and what that looks like, and some great policy tools as well for municipalities to implement incentives for low carbon construction in their municipalities as well. And we welcome people also to reach out to us at fourthpig.org if they have any questions or want to start a co-op in construction. We're happy to talk and about green building and co-ops anytime.
And if they want to renovate their home or
and if they want to hire us.
Okay. Hey, Melinda, it's so great to see you. I know it's been far too long since I was up at Lake of Bays and seeing you in person. So hopefully when we get through COVID, we'll have an opportunity to do something like this when we're actually together in person. So it's good to see you again.
Look forward to it.
Okay,
Thanks
take care. Bye now.
Care.
Everyone
Bye.
be safe. Continue to wear your mask, wash your hands, physically distant, but remain social solidarity. So take care.